Hello there guys, and welcome to my channel. If you've seen some of my recent videos, you may be aware that I recently started a dual build of two B-17Gs. The first of those was painted in a bomber command scheme to represent the RAF's Fortress 3, and I'll put a link to that video in the top right corner if I remember. And this is the second of those, the US version of the B-17G in natural metal finish. The US stopped painting their B-17s in roughly late 1943, early 1944, which of course reduced the overall weight of the plane and therefore caused a slight increase in speed as well. Now I showed in my previous video how I built the aircraft, so this video will focus on the painting and the weathering. You can see from the box art here we have an option of a quite interesting aircraft, with an overall olive drab finish, but with one wing in natural metal finish. That's nice enough, but I've always wanted to do the natural metal finish with the coloured wingtips. That would require some third-party decals, so I picked up this Kit's World Warbird set, which offers me two options, Ice Col Katy and Anxious Angel. And we should note there's a difference between Ice Col Katy here and another aircraft called Ice Cold Katy. These paint schemes are essentially the same, the only real difference being the letters on the tail and your choice of naked lady on the nose. So to start the painting process, the entire aircraft was given a coat of Tamiya grey primer, and then straight away I went in for painting the red tails, elevators and wingtips. My logic for painting these first was that although they'd go over the natural metal finish easily enough, it's a light colour, putting the paint on the natural metal paint could quite well just take away the metallicness and just change the tone of it slightly where the masking tape had been. And before you shout at the screen, I know I've painted the elevators red here. It should be the horizontal tail planes, not the elevator part. I do fix that in a minute. Next up, and with similar logic, I painted all of the anti-glare parts of the aircraft, so the inward facing parts of the four engines and the area of the nose just in front of the cockpit. And that's all done in AK Real Colours Olive Drab. Once that was done, I could mask off all of those parts, and the masking on that olive drab helps me choose the shape, so I don't have to be concerned about the overspray there. And then I can get down the metal finish. Now personally, I'm a really big fan of the Vallejo Metal Colours range of paints. They brush really well, but they also airbrush straight out of the bottle. Although I did see a great tip on another channel recently that said that you could thin them with a small amount of X20A Tamiya acrylic thinner, and they went down even better. Nevertheless, I put down a base coat of their aluminium over the entire aircraft. I am going to introduce some variation, but I wanted this to be the base colour. The next step was to mask off certain panels on the aircraft. Here you can see I've done it mainly on the wings, but of course I did it on the underside of the aircraft as well, and on the fuselage. I wanted variety on here, but of course not too much variety. I don't want it looking like a licorice allsort, but at the same time I'm aware that once you get some varnish on and some weathering going, it will all sort of flatten down. Here we have a couple of panels which have been painted in the dark aluminium colour. And to be honest, what I tend to do here when I'm doing these different panels, if I've just painted something in say dark aluminium and my next colour is white aluminium, I'll just chuck the white aluminium straight into the airbrush without cleaning it out, and you end up with a bit of a mix of both colours, and that gives you a bit more variation. I also used a bit of Tamiya XF16 aluminium on here. And as I unmasked, I was surprised to see I have barely any bleed. I did, however, for reasons unknown to me, not paint the olive drab all the way to the nose. I have no idea why I did that. Next up were the decals. Vallejo do make a varnish for their metal colours. I don't bother using it, to be honest, and in fact I didn't use any varnish underneath the decals here. I decided to go for Ice Col Katy, I was a bit disappointed to see there was some sort of damage to the decals here with some extra ink on the white areas. Of course I could always fall back to the kit decals if they didn't work properly. Ice Col Katy was delivered in May 1944 and assigned to the 534th Bomb Squadron at RAF Ridgewell. According to the American Air Museum website, she completed 54 combat missions before ultimately being returned to the US in mid-1945 and scrapped at the end of 1945. The Galeri marker pens were once again super useful for painting the machine guns. So these were base painted in black and then given a metallic steelish colour over the top with the marker pens. I didn't want my aircraft to be super chromy shiny, so the best choice of varnish I thought would be a matte varnish over the top. I did that with VMS matte varnish, and then once it was done I could remove any of the masking over the glazing. At this stage I also put the landing gear in place, which fit really well, and the bomb bay doors, which don't. One of the key features of the B-17G is the nose turret. That needed a bit of refining there on those joints, but ultimately I thought it didn't look too bad. My initial attempt at weathering used some sepia oil paint, which is kind of my go-to oil paint, for a pin wash. However, after applying it on one wing, I wasn't really happy with it. I found it just looked a bit too dirty, and it had a sort of an effect of filtering the colour of the wing without really adding much. So I did my best to sort of wipe that away, and then I went instead for this Ammo black panel line wash. This is one of the things that I've had for a long time, sitting at the back of the drawer, so I thought, probably time to use it. And I was much happier with that dark black colour rather than the brown colour. What I tended to do here was to do one of the wings, move back to the horizontal stabiliser, and then by the time that was done, go back to the wing for any cleanup. And the cleanup is done with an odourless thinner, just lightly dampening the brush, and if possible trying to clean up in the direction of the airflow. Now, weathering and oil staining tends to be a bit of a controversial topic, I find. I wanted to do quite a lot of staining here because you do see it quite often on B-17s, and of course a natural metal finish seems to emphasise that, compared to say the exhaust soot marks on a Lancaster, which is already brown and green. One thing to note is that those 4 vents behind the engine are exactly that, they're vents, so they don't leak any oil. And if you look at the patterns of weathering, oil streaks back from the engines, but then it goes in between those vents. It doesn't actually come out of the vents itself. Presumably the airflow from the vents is what keeps that section clear. So I took some dark oil paint, and to be honest with you, I've forgotten whether I used sepia or engine grease. but I streaked it backwards from the engine to the edge of the wing. And then really the work here comes in the refining of it with the odourless thinner. And that's the great thing about oil paints, you can refine until you're happy with them. Which is great because I was not happy at first. And in the end what I decided to do was just get the pattern right, not care about it coming from behind the vents, and then going with a cotton bud dipped in some odourless thinner and just wipe clear the bit directly behind the vent, leaving the trails in between. How does it look? I wasn't sure at first how I felt, but I think it's not too bad overall. Maybe I could do a better job of making the oil paint, the oil stains, sort of bloom out a bit more near the engines. This seems to have just one or two really heavy oil leaks rather than lots of small ones. But I think for a first attempt I'm not too unhappy. On the underside, where I was doing pure exhaust stains, so soot, I took some black pigment powder, a very soft brush, and just gently guided that back towards the edge of the wing. You just put a tiny amount of the pigment powder at the exhaust end and then just drag it back. And I think that looked quite good. I was a little bit tempted to go back and try to refine the oil paints with this technique, but I thought I would quit while I was ahead and leave things as they are. And with that, my B-17G natural metal finish was finished. And there we go guys, that was my build of Airfix's B-17G in a natural metal finish in 1/72 scale. I hope you enjoyed this. My RAF Fortress 3 was super popular, so we'll see whether or not this video is more popular or less popular than the RAF version. This model represents another project which has been on my desk, or rather by the side of my desk, for quite a while now, as I'm slowly chipping away at those existing projects. I do of course have one project which has been around for a long time, which is the York by Mach 2 models, and that needs finishing. I've really got to get that aircraft done. I actually came quite close, but I wasn't happy with the finish that I'd done on it, and I ended up re-priming it all and starting again. Anyway, that's something that I want to get onto in the next few weeks. I'd like to say thank you to all of you for watching, and special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. Your ongoing support is massively appreciated. Thank you very much guys. And of course, thank you to everyone for watching, well done if you made it this far. I hope to see you in the next video, and until then, have fun modelling.